Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Direct Selling Executives Forum's next session on crafting a distributor's journey. When Gail and I were putting together topics, we were so excited about how important this is. And one of the consultants in the space that I had connected with years ago that I knew would be powerful to bring in for this conversation in this panel is Ben Robinson. And so for those of you that haven't met Ben before or are brand new to the Direct Selling Executives Forum, we'll go ahead and make an intro in a moment, and then we'll pass it to our host, Gail Ansado today, and Gail will be walking us through your panel questions as we jump into the discussion today. So for those of you that are brand new to the Direct Selling Executives Forum, if you're listening on the podcast or you're on YouTube, the DSEF is an invite-only community of direct selling referral marketing executives on LinkedIn. That's where you can find us. If you go to directsellingexecutivesforum.com, you can click to apply to join there, or you can go to LinkedIn and type in Direct Selling Executives Forum to find the actual group. It's absolutely free to join in the community. Most people get in because they're invited by a friend who's also a direct selling executive in the space. With that, I want to go ahead and say, well, who is Ben Robinson? Well, he's on having an amazing accent that I know you're all going to fall in love with, so don't be mesmerized, Americans, with the British accent, right? We always get mesmerized. Ben has partnered with renowned industry leaders such as Avon Global, The Body Shop, Forever Living Products, Utility Warehouse, that's like the British version of ACN, for those of you that aren't familiar with Utility Warehouse, Mary Kay, Oriflame, Tokara, and many other distinguished brands in our space. With his expertise in managing social media content and crafting compelling distributor narratives. So if you guys remember back to our Brent Duncan episode about content being king, there's many things Ben would be nodding his head at, right, from that previous episode, gang. Ben works through using impactful content and digital tools to help the newest people in the space be successful. And by focusing on those crucial initial months, Ben's strategies have dramatically enhanced new member retention rates and propelled product sales for those he chooses to work with. Ben, thank you so much for coming out here today. It's a super pleasure to have you.
No, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, I know this topic's a fun one, and the questions come in from the panel. So, Gail, we're going to pass the call to you. Let's go ahead and get started with what the panel's been asking.
All right. First off, welcome to the DSEF Ben. I'm with two Bens today, and today we're going to discuss crafting distributor journeys. And in the fast-paced and competitive direct selling landscape, it's essential for companies to design and optimize effective journeys for their distributors. And a distributor's journey encompasses their entire experience from the moment they join the company to their growth and their achievements along the way. Our first question is, when it comes to crafting that successful distributor's journey, where would you suggest an executive team begin?
So I think the first step in anything that we do or in any journey for a distributor is just understanding where that all begins. So in terms of the digital landscape, what does the digital onboarding look like? And I say digital because there's obviously a lot that happens when a new person is onboarded, but it's how are you communicating to them the different resources that they have available? So what kind of training is available, what kind of tools are available, and what content is available, and how do they access that? And it's important to look at how your vision and what you're providing may differ from the teams that may be within your company as well. So entire trees and networks, they may have their own kind of vision of this and how it looks in terms of what tools they're suggesting they use, what content they're creating potentially and making available to them as well. And then really getting an understanding in the analytics behind that. So if you're onboarding new people, what do the retention rates of new distributors look like through that first 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and understanding how that may correlate with sales. So is there a relationship between getting quick sales and then an increase in retention rates? We would assume that there is. And then does that make sense and line up across that entire kind of time range? And again, just coming back to the teams because they're so important, do they have different rates on quick sales and sales going on and retention rates, all of that kind of stuff? That's kind of the very beginning step that we would say. And then maybe making some goals around that. So what are your goals for sales? What are your goals for retention rates? How are you going to measure that stuff? How are you going to track all of that stuff? Is it, and again, you look at how would you want to achieve that over certain time periods and all that kind of stuff. And then really just understanding, and I think a lot of this gets lost by a lot of direct selling companies. And I apologize if you're a company that already has this, but what's the destination of the distributor? Because it's very easy to blanket everyone into the same boat. But really, we take a kind of 80-20 rule, or actually, I take that back. We take a 75-25 rule. And it's taking, you've got everyone coming in the top of that funnel. Last week at the Canadian DSA event, the CEO of Manitoba, a lot of research that he was sharing to look for an additional $500 jobs. They are, like me, full-time parents. They have a lot of stuff going on. So they're kind of limited in what they do. So you've got that 75%. It's making sure that you have tools and you have content and stuff available to cater to that. So when I say tools, I know at Naxam you have some of these tools as well, but you have kind of tools for analytics or providing with them pre-written content, so they don't have to continuously create stuff themselves when they're really restricted on time. Making sure that they have the ability to have sales attribution in the content that they're creating, and giving them a really easy strategy to create quick wins, because that's really where they're going to get the positive reinforcement they need to stick around with their business. A really fantastic one with this kind of group that we've done in the past is with Avon. So Avon Global. So not the US Avon, but Avon in all the other countries.
There's
but
two.
we work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's always a lot of confusion with me being over this side of the pond nowadays.
Yeah.
But we do a first 30-day campaign with them that is just, it's had fantastic results in terms of retention. But what it does is we instruct them, hey, create a Facebook group. Really super easy. We give you a strategy and a walkthrough guide of how to do it. We'll give you the assets for the cover, and you can upload your own images, stuff like that. And then we have a system that will automate some of that as well. And it will walk through a narrative. So it will say stuff like, they'll have a pre-written post that will go out on day one that will say, welcome to my group. I've created this because I've just started with Avon. I really like Avon. Here are my goals with this group. If it's your thing, stick around. If it's not, feel free to leave. No hard feelings, that kind of thing. And then the next day there'll be another post within that story. Exactly. And it will be, just got my starter kit, and there may be an image of that starter kit that we have or that they can upload. And it says, I'm going to go on and I'm going to review some of the products in my starter kit and tell you why I like them. And then day 3, it'll be, here's the first product I'm looking at. It's a glamour stick. Here's why I really like it. And again, we can provide them text that we spin into thousands of variations, or they can just adapt that however they want to adapt that to add authenticity to it. And it will also have URLs that will direct people specifically to their microsite that we have tracking on, stuff like that. And it's being able to provide those kind of tools for that 75% is just super, super effective to get the quick wins, to get them knowing that this was a good decision, positive reinforcement to keep them sticking around. So it's really looking at the destination for that 75%. The then 20% we would call, I guess, business builders, people that they somewhat know what they're doing. They've been doing their business a little while, and really that's about just making sure they have the correct digital assets. So making sure they have the latest images, the latest videos, and that they can use to craft their own story and their own content, and then giving tools that they can work with for that as well. So understanding the analytics behind what's working, making sure they have those calls to action, and again, making sure they have now they're at the level where the training is likely going to be effective for them as well. And kind of all that gets wrapped up in this whole conversation with compliance, because I know a lot of companies are scared of the big C word, but it's a lot of these compliance breaches, right? They're not through malicious intent. They're just through a lack of understanding. Yeah, exactly that. So it's making sure that you're giving them content that's compliant, that's professional, that is likely going to help them initially without the need for them to feel a little bit scared of what they're writing is going to be non-compliant, or potentially posting something that's not going to be compliant as well. So those are kind of the first couple levels. And then we have those 5%, those outliers, right? The people that we would call authentic content superstars. They know what they're doing. They likely have big teams under them. They're creating amazing content all over social media, messaging people, etc., etc. So it's still trying to make sure that you have stuff for them. So again, training, fantastic for them, giving them the latest stuff that's coming through, but also making sure they have tools for collaborating with their team and sharing the content that they're creating that they want to share, providing them with kind of other tools like pop streams. I don't know, some of you may be aware of a company called Streamstyle in the space that are just doing some amazing things with pop streams, where it's a user can create a video, it has live video shopping with products embedded in the video, the whole checkout process in there. So
yeah, we'll
that
continue to see
is
that
just
evolve in our
crazy
world.
effective.
Yeah,
Especially with
this
Gen Z
idea.
coming through.
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh, this idea that you could take this shirt. Oh, you want this shirt? Yeah, just click on it. Oh, you want this haircut? Just click on it. Your barber can now give you this haircut.
Yeah.
Like it's everything that people are taking in this video. That's good stuff.
Yeah, it's removing the friction from the sale a lot of the time, and that is something that I mean, I'm a millennial, but Gen Z coming through, it's the purchasing process is different. They want to see something, they want to buy it immediately. It's reducing the barriers to entry of purchasing that we will work with Streamstyle to do that kind of stuff. So that stuff is really awesome as well. But making sure that you have all those levels covered and looking at the destination, not just the beginning of that journey.
You know, and what I love about what you said, Ben, and to sum up like high level frameworks, people always ask for frameworks when they're listening to the podcast or on the stream, is something we talk about a lot. And it was in Clint's episode. We've talked about this in Brett's episode. Now Ben's saying it again, is this idea that you need to go model appropriate behavior. So when you think about onboarding people, you have to model appropriate behavior. Passionate people who love your product and service that are just ignorant, right, are going to say whatever they want to say to create curiosity around your product in social media and to get people there. And that's not malicious. It's just them thinking, oh, maybe this is what I need to say to get attention. And so if you don't spend the time putting together the tools and the systems and the platforms and the content that model the appropriate behavior for people to share, you're just leaving it up to the gods a chance, right, for this thing to go well. And that's a risky game. That's like man, I will share some crazy examples, but that's just like you would never do that with that would be like taking your investment portfolio to the casino, right? You're not going to do that with your business and what you've worked in. You're not going to just leave it up to chance in this world. The other piece that you shared, Ben, that I think is very important for people to get clear on, this idea of retention rates. So the word retention rates, people are like, yeah, I need to know retention rates. Well, if you asked a dozen of my clients what a retention rate is, you would get a dozen different definitions of what they mean by a retention rate, because it could mean, did they make a sale within their first 30 days? It could mean, did they just pay for their own personal subscription, their own auto ship within 30 days? What does it mean? Did they sponsor a retail customer in the first 30 days? So getting clear on what that target is as a company, and then actually tracking it and actually taking actions towards it. Many times on the show before. And then once you know that number, backing it up to saying what creates that number, getting into what the real leading indicators are of it, because just one number going up or down isn't a lever. Okay, it's not something you can pull. You need to know what leading indicators are influencing that numbers. And then the last point you said, Ben, before we go back to Gail, I just think this is really good. You mentioned team systems. And man, when I got started in this space, Ben, it was all about team systems. Like there was a point in time when even in our company, Naxim, we would build for leaders, right? We haven't built for leaders for almost a decade, it feels like now. 8 years, I'd have to check, probably 2016. So yeah, almost 8 years since the last time we built a leader system. I only work with corporate these days and have, but in the past, you would build team systems all the time. And what I have found is team systems create confusion every time. So if you go, like I could rewind the clock to speaking at Zango Convention in 2011. When I'm on stage for thousands of people, you got off stage there and there was something like 8 different round tables in the foyer of completely different team building systems that you could subscribe to, and think of how, and 2 were our clients. So we had competing ones at the same company. And such a weird mix, because the newest person would hear one message in California, and then you enroll a friend in New York and they go to a local event in New York and they hear a different message in New York. And it's just confusion. And we say it all the time in this space, but it's important for us to be reminded to executives here, a confused mind does nothing. Confused mind does nothing. And so if you didn't do the work up front and you're now stuck in this place where there's team A doing this system and team B doing this system, you're gonna have to ask yourself, can we take those methodologies, whether they're doing, a tag message sequence on Facebook is usually what I see today. You have one team doing ad tag messaging, and another team who's doing a lot of phone prospecting and text prospecting is usually what we see a lot of today, and that are kind of at odds. Like this team over here says, nah, ad tag messages are the holy grail, and this team says, nah, phone prospecting and texting is the magic grail, right? You got to say, could our systems have a path for both of those things within the corporate system, where we're modeling the appropriate way to do those things within the corporate system? Those become some of the bigger questions you have to ask once you really know what's going on in your field. Because at the end of the day, you don't want 8 other systems happening outside a corporate gang that are outside your purview, outside of your modeled compliant content, outside of what you're doing. It is confusion to your field.
Yeah, and just coming back to your point on the compliance stuff, you think it's confusing now, and it's a bit of the almost like wild west. What happens when everyone starts implementing these affiliate models? That's when it's going to start to get really interesting, because they're not going to be willing. I say that, and I may be wrong, but I don't think most affiliates are going to come in and be interested in doing a lot of training and going through that. They want to have a quick way of understanding the products, being able to educate on the products quickly, and being able to market them and do what they're there for, which is to build their own affiliate business off the back of it. So it's just super important having something that they can use that is going to nip compliance in the bud. Obviously, you've got listening tools. There's a lot of fantastic listening tools in the industry, but trying to nip it in the bud is going to be something that's very, very important with affiliate models.
Agreed.
Thank you for your insights. I'm sure that everybody listening right now have a lot of things that they learned already. We talked about how to start with creating a distributor journey. Now let's talk about some of the pitfalls. I know we touched a little bit on the possibilities of non-compliance and other stuff, but what are some of the pitfalls that you've seen companies run into as they craft a distributor journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've spoken about a few of them already, which is not focusing on these different destinations of where the distributor is going to end up. So not focusing on that 75%, the 5%, and the 20%. 75, 25, but then also just assuming the training is going to be effective for everyone, and it's not. A lot of people learn in different ways. Some people learn just by doing. So again, it's making sure that that's not your only approach. It's still a fantastic approach. You're going to hit a lot of people doing that, but making sure that you're really working on different training and different tools and content available for all of those different levels. And again, with the affiliate program as well, that's going to bring a whole another piece to all of this. Also, just doing social for the sake of social is something that I've seen a lot of in the industry. It's really interesting, especially with some of these larger corporations, and I'm not pointing any fingers, but there's been talks where people are talking about how they have these apps and how they share content, and it's talking about, it's great, we have the content in there. Some companies still, like even huge ones, they're using Dropbox or they're using Google Drive. They're having Facebook groups or pages and stuff like that where they're sharing content, and that content typically is just an image or a video, and they're saying repost it. Okay, that's great for brand awareness, but how is that going to impact your bottom line? How is that actually going to help the distributor? And I think part of that is making sure that you have content and systems that are actually going to provide intrinsic value to the user. So it's going to have a URL within that piece of content that is going to direct people directly for that microsite for sales attribution. It's going to have tracking on it so that you can understand which post is generating sales, is generating clicks to the store, stuff like that. It's understanding which pieces of content are being used the most by your distributors. What do they like? What do they don't like? And it's really interesting that a lot of companies are just pushing the stuff out there saying we're doing social, but you're kind of half-assing it. You're not really putting in the pieces in place to understand how it's going to impact the business. And it's such a, everyone knows digital is a massive piece of this industry, becoming more and more prevalent, especially after COVID. But people just don't seem to want to put a lot of effort in, and they think they can get the images, that's fine, and that's kind of enough. So that's kind of sometimes whacking your head against the brick wall when you're trying to explain. No, it's a whole lot more than what you're talking about. So
checking a box. We have a Facebook page. Checking a box.
Exactly that. And
then
it's
not the same thing.
Yeah, and they need a strategy behind it. So they need to understand these analytics, have a way to consume that data, and really create a strategy for continuous improvement. Because if I'm helping a company, we have our platform, we have our content going out every month. We can see who's using it, how it's generating clicks to the store, what revenue it's driving from the store. And then you can do almost like A/B testing, stuff like that. You can understand, okay, these assets were really successful. Why were they successful? Even though these ones may have been used more, these ones are actually driving the revenue. Exactly. So you've got to then educate the sellers as well, but then creating a feedback loop. So, okay, this stuff was amazing. What do we need to do to apply it to the next batch of content that we're creating to make the next batch more productive and generating more sales and that kind of stuff, and just creating this feedback loop. And a lot of companies just overlook the importance of how important that is. And I think another one is just, and this has probably been my last pitfall that I can think before I say too many bad things, but I think a lot of emphasis in companies is focused on, Instagram stories, we got to do Instagram stories, or Facebook Reels, we got to do that, or TikTok, we got to do that. And yes, I agree. But is that going to help the 75%? Because you don't have a way, and there isn't an easy way, to put in URLs and stuff like that to drive sales. It's more based on the user. They're going to have to create that content themselves, or they can take assets and upload those and use those. But there's no easy way to embed a URL into that stuff. And really, that is the secret sauce in generating revenue through digital. So it's not focusing on that is the everything of social, getting on TikTok, because brand awareness, amazing. But at the end of the day, if you want to increase the retention, get quick wins for sellers, it's making sure that you're utilizing all the different platforms, especially those that can leverage URLs to drive sales and messaging and that kind of stuff. So WhatsApp, content for WhatsApp, content for iMessage, emails, etc., etc., etc.
Actually asking for an order is what you're saying, Ben. And that's so important, because if you got someone at the beginning of their journey, so here's that pitfall game that Ben's getting to. Think about it. If you put all their attention into branding efforts and audience building efforts versus selling, right? When are they going to get their first sale? When are they going to say this thing actually works? When are they going to say, I made some money? So what Ben's saying is what we see too in the data. If you can get them to go make their first sale in the first 30 days, that person's going to stick around a lot longer than the person who's got some more followers because they increased some branding in their first 30 days. So you want to hear that. And the part you just shared about having a framework for rinsing and repeating content, because it's not just creating beautiful content, it's what are they willing to share, out of what they're willing to share, what actually works. I just want to pause for a moment. There was a report the DSEF, so this podcast, put out in January of this year, called with a very clickbaity title, right? How to grow virally in 2023, right, Ben? So I can't get more clickbaity than that, right? Because you don't grow virally, right? But the report itself was about a decision-making framework that highlights a framework of exactly what Ben was talking about. And Gil, I know one of the last questions that the panel had today was about framework. So let's go there and expand on that thought Ben had, because that's right in line with some of the reports the DSEF's been putting out, stuff we're seeing, stuff they're seeing. Let's expand on that. So go ahead.
Sure. We'll definitely link the viral trends report on the notes below as well. For our third question, if there was a framework for a company, or a framework that a company could follow to build a solid journey for their distributors, what would that framework look like?
First step, I guess, in the framework internally would be this digital onboarding, making sure that the digital onboarding is going to make sense, that you know where you are and where you potentially need to be in terms of making sure there's awareness of everything that's out there and they can use. And then having and again, it's probably three different frameworks. It's frameworks for that 75%. It's a framework for the 20%, a framework for the 5%, but then overlapping all of that, making sure that there's a way for them to transition from each group to the other group. Because at the end of the day, if everyone in the company was an authentic content superstar, your business would be just absolutely unbelievable. So it's making sure that they can transition between that. And it's interesting because we talk to a lot of distributors and a lot of different companies, kind of that advise us as well on what we're doing on content, stuff like that. But if you're joining a company at the very start, it's very difficult if someone's saying, okay, just go on Facebook Live and you can talk about this and that. And it's building up the confidence, building up the ability to sit in front and talk in front of a camera, building up their education on the products so they can talk about them educationally and not just kind of make stuff up to get a sale, but doing all of that stuff. So having a framework that's going to provide a transition between those, I guess, mini frameworks is what you might call them. And then having a strategy around the content, just to make sure that it's not going stale. So if you are releasing a new product, you need to make sure that everyone that you're going to provide content to is aware that that's coming, that is given the right content at the right time. Again, region by region as well. If your organization has multiple regions, making sure you can make sure that each distributor is collecting content that is meant for their region with the correct pricing, dates, times, and stuff like that. And communicating that so everyone knows when new content is coming. And I know some companies do this really well. Avon, I'll give it up to them, because they run campaigns. I think it's every 6 weeks now. It might be moving to every 4 weeks, but everyone knows every period of time, new products, new content is going to be provided to them to help them maximize their business, because no one wants stale content where they're just posting the same old thing constantly. So having that stuff in there. And I guess really the last step is making sure that you have a strategy of this continuous feedback loop. So making sure that you have sales attribution in there, making sure that you have tracking in there. Tracking really isn't that difficult to do, but making sure that the tracking in there is telling you on a post by post or asset by asset basis, clicks, engagement, if possible, revenues that are generated, and then having your own framework internal to measure retention rates. And then, like I said before, just feeding that whole thing in and just building it and improving it month on month on month, because that's how you're going to help your distributors build everything digitally over the next number of years.
Well, and that's right, Ben. Like you talk about, once you create your structure, in America we talk about baseball analogies, right? So we'll say, like, you're not going to knock it out of the park the first time, is what we say many times. Like many times you're going to do your best, right? Everyone comes to the table as an executive with their best assumption of, like, well, this is what I do for the 75% in your example. Here's what I do for the 20. Here's what I do for the 5. And you work with consultants and you work with experts and you give your best shot. But that's not where the real, like, massive wins come at all. Many times it's in the work you just shared about the feedback loops, is what we've seen with platforms too. It's that model of, instead of just moving from, oh, we tried something new and we look at the results and 90 days later we tweak something, and only tweaking your business 4 times a year, which is where many people aren't as advanced as Avon, right? And they're only doing it 4 times a year, right? Is what would it mean for your business to move to monthly iterations, to where you could 12 times a year be looking at all this data and saying, okay, out of the stuff we created, this is what the reps were willing to share, this stuff they weren't willing to share. Hey, out of the stuff they were willing to share, this is the 20% that had the highest conversion. It's that work that many times is missing, where we've been stuck in this old methodology of just hiring smart people and saying, hey, look at sales data, look at transactional data, and just help us grow virally. And we assume, and this is to our fault, many leaders in this space, that a director of sales or director of marketing can just look at sales and enrollments and subscriptions from last month and somehow have the insight to know how to grow this business better next month. And that's not enough information today. It just isn't. And so I love that you talked about getting into the true tactics of who these people are, because in addition to knowing what they shared or were willing to share and what worked, that information changes over time. You might find that people really like, for this campaign, pictures of people enjoying the product, but for this other campaign, it's a bunch of memes from old TV shows that was people laughing that got people to then go check out the picture about this product. It had nothing to do with the product of the social content it was. And so you learn weird stuff. I shared an example with a client last week. I was in Atlanta doing a project on site with a client who was loading up their social media sharing engine. And I was sharing with them that I had a client who had a ton of success with Star Wars memes, right? And you would have never thought Star Wars memes, but they were a bunch of Australians and they liked Star Wars memes, and that's what worked for them.
That's funny, because
and you sit there and say,
we had a It's crazy because we had, I think, our most engaged with post that we created years ago, and I can't remember which company it was for now, but it was Brussels sprouts. Do you like Brussels sprouts? Yes or no? And it had thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands of comments, like when shared by various people. So, and that's a really, really interesting point as well, because I don't think I mentioned that, but this is probably another pitfall, but it's making sure that not all the content is pure sales, making sure that you mix in engaging content, community building content, stuff like that as well. It can be still on brand, but making sure that you're mixing that kind of stuff in as well is really important.
Yeah, and understanding what conversations even look like on a certain platform, right? Like people share very different types of content on different platforms. As Gail, it's like, yes, they do. Yeah, it's great.
Yes, they do.
Well, Ben, before we wrap the show to Gail, where she's going to walk us through where people can find episodes during the DSEF, I just want to say thank you for being out here today. It was such a pleasure to have you on the forum and to be here, excited about the way you speak into people's lives and the content your team creates. If you want to dive deeper on the content conversation itself, there's an episode that'll be released previous to this one with Brent Duncan from Strategic Choice Partners, where the panel questions were all around like, how do you even plan for that content? And how do you even walk through the ideation of it? So without us spending another hour here giving some of our examples, I'd encourage you guys to go check out Brent Duncan's episode. Gail, if you want to make a note, let's add that in addition to the report, let's add that to the show notes so people can easily get to that if they're on Spotify or others. That it's a powerful next step to the conversation Ben Robinson walked us through today, gang. If you didn't yet listen to Brent Duncan's episode, definitely do that. And with that, I just want to thank you so much for being here, Ben, today. It was a total pleasure to hang out.
No, thank you both. It was a pleasure hanging out with you both. So thank you very much for your time.
All right. Well, gang, thanks for the show. Back to you, Gail.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Ben, for inspiring and sharing your insights with us. You can find the DSEF episodes on Facebook and LinkedIn. We do have our invite-only groups, but at the same time, we do live streams every Thursdays, and we also have podcasts on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and you can just look up Direct Selling Executives Forum. And we will also make a note of all the links on the show notes below. Thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Have a blessed day. Bye for now.